Hey guys, welcome into another co-release of the Marvel Stuff and Radioactive Papercuts podcast. Throughout this episode, you're going to hear me call it the second day of Thor week, but actually, due to some scheduling, it's going to be the first day of Thor week. We're going to do a Marvelous Steps on the first Thor movie, and that'll be out tomorrow, and then we're going to keep having fun with Thor week, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Welcome in to another co-release of the Marvel Stuff podcast and the Radioactive Papercuts podcast. We're doing a Thor week. We're going strong. This is day 2. We're doing another comic book club. I, of course, am Josh Kennedy from Facebook, joined by Noah King Bates. Noah, always good to have you on the Marvel Stuff. We're always killing it on Radioactive Papercuts, but always good to have you over here. How you doing?
Oh, every day is Thor's day this week.
Man, that is so much better branding. Why didn't I think of that? I'll name the day 4 on this Thursday. It'll be Thor's Day, and it'll be our spoiler-free review, and it's gonna be great. Good work, Noah. Today we read Thor: God of Thunder. This was volume 1 of a newer series, and it's called The God Butcher. I believe that it was 2014 when this came out, and this was the premiere of The God Butcher, which I find really cool because we're getting a live-action version of him 8 years after his, introduction into comic books, which is really early on compared to a lot of other characters that have been around for 80 years or whatever. So there's not much of an established history or known stuff about this character, which I think it makes the movie that much more exciting for people.
Oh yeah, I mean, outside of Miles, but I mean, he isn't live action. I think this is the quickest turnaround of from Paige to, I guess, Kamala as well.
Kamala is also Gorr. Relatively new too, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you're kind of doing this stuff because we have gotten to see some of the better known characters already. So let's roll. Keep running with this stuff. I'm having a great time. I got another cover here, just another thing there.
I like that stuff. One.
Of course, guys, we're going on Spotify. You can see the audio in the video. Well, you can only see the video. You can hear us anywhere through podcasts. And then I'll also be posting this up on the Radioactive Papercuts YouTube channel. We don't normally do the visual aspect of Marvel stuff, but this type of episode, we definitely have to. Noah, this is episode 4 of our comic book club. Are you still having fun, having a great time?
I am. I can't wait. I actually did enjoy not being as big of a Star Wars fan. The Journal of Obi-Wan Kenobi was really fun. I think that I enjoy the character of Gorr the God Butcher and the way that they told this story, at least in these first 5 issues.
5, yeah.
I enjoyed that storytelling, and Thor's never been someone that I'm like, oh, let me pick up a Thor comic and read it. But I actually enjoyed a lot of what I read.
I feel the exact same way. I've always respected Thor as a character. I actually like him a lot because I'm a big mythology guy. But you feel like you know everything there is to know about Thor without having to read up on him. You're like, okay, yeah, he's the God of Thunder from Norse mythology. Let's move on, keep moving on. Like, there's other more interesting characters, in my opinion. So it's kind of cool that we I think this is my first solo Thor graphic novel I've ever read. Is that the same for you?
Yes. I mean, I read Fear Itself, which has a lot to do with Thor. And of course, no, I guess Ragnarok. I've read Ragnarok.
I have not read Ragnarok, so that works out.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That one so far, I would say Ragnarok before this, in terms of just Thor readings, comic wise, Ragnarok was my favorite, but I just am very intrigued by Thor the God Butcher and the device that they use with the 3 different timelines of Thor for these first 5 issues. I enjoyed.
I wasn't expecting that at all. We're having the young Thor from 893 AD. We have modern day Thor, and then we have an old Thor that's like 1,000 years into the future. Our backdrop right now is the collection of, I think it was issue 1 and 2, the covers. I'll put it on the screen eventually, but yeah, the cool thing about Thor is his rogues gallery. You kind of have to be a god to fight him. I've always found that to be a problem with these high powered godly, or in this case an actual god characters, is Superman it took a couple of tries to like get anyone that really stood a chance against him. And we have Lex Luthor, which is great for him. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to put anyone against Superman and expect them to even put up a fight. And I think it's the same thing with Thor here. You're facing the God of Thunder, who's thousands of years old, can strike you with lightning. He's got the Mjolnir. Well, he used the Mjolnir a little bit later in the comic, because that was kind of cool. The beginning of this, he starts out.
Yeah, Jabberjaw.
Yep. So let's just jump into it. Issue 1 kind of brings us into the scene. It starts in 893. I put Thor is living his Zeus life. He's battling hella mortals and just banging lots of chicks, doing his thing. And he's really living up to just being a Viking god and living amongst his followers, which is a pretty cool concept. It's not very common. I think that's what makes Norse mythology, I don't know, I don't want to say more interesting, but definitely intriguing to like read up on it and be like, okay, so the gods actually participate in mortal affairs. It's not just this omnipotent person that you like at more established religions nowadays, where we have a physical form of Thor. And it was a lot of fun. How'd you feel about the intro?
Again, I like the fact that it starts off with him not having Mjolnir. He has Jabberjaw, the axe. I love the way that I said it earlier. I love how majority of this book is told like a Norse mythology, where it's told as a story, and then like the conversations we have in between are few and far between. Actually, like when I was reading this, it felt more like a book,
right?
Than with pictures in it, which I love. But I thought it started off with the cockiness of Thor. It reminded me of a Party Thor from What If. Like it was giving me very frat boy party life, until we of course get the dead god, who as I was like looking at it, I was trying to figure out like, was it looked more like a American native god.
It was a Native American. I don't think it actually revealed which god it was, but
no.
Whiskey Jack might be one of them. It's called Whiskey Jack within American Gods, and I'm going to bring up American Gods a few times throughout. This is my favorite novel of all time. It's written by Neil Gaiman, and it really explores some of the old school gods, and that one specifically, I'm like, yeah, it could be him. The first god that we find the head of in the river, it doesn't say who it is, but Thor could tell he was a god by his eyes, which was kind of a weird giveaway, but why not? That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And Thor's scared. That's not something we're used to seeing in comic books. I mean, he's still a young, cocky kid that thinks he can do anything in the world, but you could tell that it hits him a little different when he's seeing the body of an immortal.
Yeah. The beginning part of this is super intriguing to me, because I mean, it starts off with him, finding a dead body, and then it jumps into him being a god. Like it was so weird, like to have this mortality of the immortals with a dead body, and then it goes right into Thor doing godlike work,
right? Of
like bringing rain. I was like, that was such a like, even though he's frightened, and again, there's time passes, he's frightened. He does like that shook him to the core, and then years later, he's still out there like doing God's work. It doesn't stop him from continuing on.
Yeah, I've got it pictured here where you can see the Native American god. It's just cool stuff, and that's a perfect way to put it. I did also enjoy that, where it sometimes time jumping can be jarring when you're reading a comic book, but I think it did it pretty well in this one. Sometimes when it jumped to the future, I was like, that was a bit like, it felt forced once or twice, but they jump, between the 3 time periods throughout the entire 5 issues, and it only really distracted me once or twice. And in this instance, we jump to modern day, like you said, and he goes to a random planet that has been through a drought for, I think, years or something like that, and it's the longest they'd ever gone through. And some random young female alien, I don't know, it didn't say the name of the race, but the name of the planet was Indigar. So that's just a side note there. And Thor shows up, and he had never been there before, and he wanted to know where their gods were because he could tell that it was kind of a godless planet. If there was gods there, they would have helped them by then. So this kind of brings the storyline from, because I mean, we jump from 893 AD where he first discovers this thing, and then from what I can tell, he doesn't really deal with Gorr or any of this God Butcher stuff again until much, much later. Obviously, they have the initial face-off that we get into in future issues in the beginning, but good stuff.
Yeah, something that I just thought about that I found to be really weird is, and I mean, this might have just been, I don't know, just like serendipity or just a weird coincidence, but the less of the gods there were, or the less people believed in the old gods, the stronger Thor, or the more worthy Thor seems to have become. Because again, you have the very beginning where he is working with people who actively believe him as the god of thunder.
Right.
And he is not worthy. So I'm wondering if the cockiness, not the falseness, but the overexuberance of god worship made him not worthy because he basked in it. And as they start to believe in it less, and the few people who do believe in it, he's no longer doing it for the praise of being a god. He's doing it because that is his duty, and that's what makes him more and more worthy. From prince to king, we see him become stronger and more worthy.
Yeah, I love how you put that. That's really cool. Yeah, he definitely becomes, like, you could going through the 3 different versions of Thor throughout the series, you can truly tell that onto the next one, he did advance as a god and as I mean, you don't want to call him a human, but his humanity has grown. He's doing a better job being there for his servants and serving his true role. Side note, I didn't note the credits at the beginning, so I might as well throw it in here. The writer of the series was Jason Aaron, and the artist was Asad Ribic. The cover art was done by Dean White on issue 1, and then I believe that's Eve's Russian last name, 2 through 5. So give them their props, because what do you think about the artwork on this one? We might as well talk about that a little bit. I thought it was pretty good. Yeah,
I genuinely enjoyed it. I really loved the use of light and lightning. I just thought the shading work on it was really good. Especially because Thor, being the god of lightning, the god of light in all intents and purposes, fighting darkness, I thought in some of the later ones using just almost all black outside of Mjolnir glowing was really, really well done.
Yeah, I agree. And just a side note here, doing these comic book clubs has really made me appreciate the just the format of the pages. Like, I've got an example on the screen where he did bring the rain. You can see that his hand goes through the panel, and the background panels are different stories. So it's different on every page. I've always noticed that reading comic books, but now that we're doing this, going in depth on these things, I'm like, man, I just don't know where they come up with some of this stuff. It's really cool. Unfortunately, no one's.
But look at home.
Go ahead.
Look at Homeboy smile.
Yeah,
that is.
He's real happy, dude.
Yeah, he's. I want someone to look at me the way that man's looking at rain. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, when you've been dying of thirst, I suppose you would probably do
I mean, I'm single. I am dying of thirst. I want someone to...
Okay. That's fair enough. Shout out to all the listeners. If you want to hit Noah up, I'm sure he's on Instagram. Go follow him real quick. Yes, it's good stuff. I appreciated the artwork. And once Thor realizes that, I mean, the girl somehow knew about Thor from stories, but she's the only one that thought to pray to gods outside of their established gods. And Thor shows up. He's like, "Where are yours?" And he goes to the, I guess, the castle in the sky type of thing. It's almost like a moon base. I don't even know what you want to call it, but it's a floating castle that the gods live in. And once he rolls in, he comes across this imagery. Strong imagery throughout this entire thing, because it truly is the God Butcher. They don't shy away from showing some, I mean, not quite grotesque, but some pretty intense death. Mm-hmm. There's not so much gore. It's still, I think, considered a comic book for teenagers, and some kids can read this too, but they pushed the limits probably as far as they could. And these gods are huge. The gods of Indigar, and clearly there's a bunch of dead ones, like piles and piles, and then some hanging from the ceiling. And this really just shows that the God Butcher's not messing around. Now, when this was introduced, this panel here, what was your initial reaction?
So for me, my initial reaction with the gore, with Gorr being Gorr, pretty much, I enjoyed the. I knew the lead up was going to be like a bunch of dead gods, like that's
right.
where we were headed into. But then, like you said, the massiveness, like even in the next panel, like he's standing around 3 of them, and they are the size of like giants. And he brings up the fact that it was like there was not a fight, there was not there was no defensive wounds, proving that just shows how strong Gorr is. He took out an entire pantheon almost unseen, theoretically.
Yeah. And as the thing develops throughout this whole story, that's what he does. He takes on pantheons of gods and just murks them all, which is some incredible levels of power that we've never even seen before. At this point in the comic is where Gorr does show his face. I put a note here. Thor comes across Pirun the Storm and Chernabog the Black, which Chernabog was a main character in American Gods as well, so that was pretty cool. I was like, oh, hey, I know this one. They were both murdered by Gorr. One was completely missing from his Pegasus, and then Chernabog was headless on his black horse. And obviously we jumped into the past again just to really establish this. And this was an introduction of the visual of Gorr. I'm going to be honest, I'm glad they switched it up for the movie, because his overall look, it's slightly intimidating, but it just feels like naked Voldemort. That's how I felt. What about you?
I find that to be way more intimidating. I thought that I know why they, switched it up and made him more human-like.
Well, Christian Bale's handsome, mostly.
Yeah, I mean, it sells tickets. But I like the simplicity of Gorr the God Butcher, the way that he is in the comics. That being said, because again, the focus for me is like that makes him so intriguing here is he's not like, as much as he is, the butcher. His focus isn't his body. His focus isn't his outward appearance. It is the gruesome mentality and of course the cloak and the all black sword that really make him so threatening.
If you saw this guy, you wouldn't think that he could take on multiple gods at once, but I think that kind of adds to the character. I'm not going to say he doesn't look intimidating, because he does, but not to the point where he could take on multiple giant gods of different universes and worlds and stuff. It just seems insane by just looking at his build. Some interesting black designs. We don't really get an origin of him so much yet, but at the end of this graphic novel, which we'll get to eventually, it seems to be teasing his actual origin. So if you want to know more about it, read the next few issues. I'm personally going to do so. I don't know if we'll do a comic book club on it, but it's interesting stuff.
And I know a bit of Gorr the God Butcher just because when I had knew that who Gorr was, I knew about the All Black. So I did a little bit of research on him before a lot more came out about Love and Thunder, just so I can read up on him. But we did skip over a little bit after he finds the dead Indigar Pantheon. He fights one of Gorr's devil dogs, and then they do the jump into the future where we see King Thor or King Odinson. And he has we see it a lot. He loses his arm at one point in time, and he gets the arm of the Destroyer that becomes his left arm. He has Mjolnir and the King's the Odin sword. And he's going on his final fight against this giant, it's like a sea of black, and he is just headed out there to slaughter. And then that's the end of like part 2. Well, at part 1.
Part 1, yeah. And yeah, I liked the actual the way that he breaks up the fight is he Gorr's just bragging about all the gods that he's killed and like what they were. He's like, I've killed many gods of war, few of poetry and love, and he was just asking which one he was. What is Thor the god of? And Thor, as he's getting tuned up, he was able to whisper, God of Thunder, and then that's when he gets struck by lightning and breaks it up. That was a fun scene. I hope they do something like that in the movie. I would be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, the with this one I really enjoyed because we get cocky Thor getting beat, and we don't really see that again as he's older and actually more defeated. We don't see him lose as much because again he doesn't have that whole pride that he's holding on to that he does as young Thor. Even at the beginning of part 2, he has this whole like it's like a couple of panels where he's trying to lift Mjolnir and he isn't worthy yet. And I mean, I'm not saying that's ultimately why he loses, but not having Mjolnir clearly seems to be
definitely hurts not having your main thing. Yeah, you can kind of see old Thor in the background. I like slight spoiler. Someone says that he looks like his dad. It was like that's pretty funny because old Thor does look identical to Odin. But then we jump into issue 2, and this introduces some cool concepts into the I guess universe they're building here, and that was Omnipotent City, the nexus of all gods. I said it was badass. It's silly for sure to think about, but they're going to use it in the movie. That I think that's in the. Oh, you haven't watched too many trailers, so I won't spoil too many things. But
I know the zoo stuff.
The zoo stuff, yeah. So I feel like. And they showed the image of a couple of other gods sitting in one place. I think Omnipotent City is going to be a pretty big set piece throughout the movie. Mm-hmm. Also, guys, I forgot to say this off the top. There are potential spoilers for the movie in this review. I told Coach I would tell you guys. We don't know. We just read the graphic novel. So if anything comes across as a spoiler after you watch the movie, that is entirely not our fault.
We're psychic.
Yes. Spoiler alert. Don't yell at us because we didn't know it was a spoiler. But what did you think about Omnipotent City? I like the idea that no mortal's ever allowed to see it.
Yes, I thought that was cool. There's definitely again, I've done my best to not look at any trailers, but I know that at one point Omnipotent City in the trailer or something is like attacked. And that would make sense to really see God Butcher's real skill in the movie is gonna probably be slaughtering the majority.
Yeah, interesting concept because that's totally different than what they did in this comic book. The comic book, it establishes that Gorr has been killing thousands of gods for hundreds and thousands of years, and then he establishes he's essentially a god serial killer, and Thor spends a lot of the next couple of issues, which we're going to get to, trying to search and find out what happened to all these gods. And that's pretty incredible stuff for Gorr.
Fun question, and this is just speculation. Do you think we will see any gods that have been talked about in the MCU? Like, do you think we'll see Khonshu? Do you think we'll get a Khonshu cameo?
That's interesting. I know, well, I guess I don't know if it's 100% confirmed, but Bast, which is the Panther god from Wakanda, people are speculating that from one of the images, that seems to be the god that's in it. So, but outside of that, I don't know. I was thinking the same thing the other day because it's established in Eternals that Athena is Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, but strategy, I guess, because Ares is the god of war. Interesting though, because could we get her in the movie? That's why I think we're just never going to get a true explanation in the MCU of how all of these gods interact. And I think Moon Knight kind of introduced that idea with the different afterlives. And if you believe in one thing, you go here. I like that idea. So that makes a lot of sense. But Thor's about to turn that kind of on its head because it's going to have multiple gods all there together. So I guess we're going to see how that plays out. Outside of those two, though, I don't know. Who were you expecting to see?
I expected to see maybe Khonshu, or she's blanking. Not
the hippopotamus god.
Yes.
I don't remember her name. It's fine. But yeah, a couple of Egyptian mythology ones.
But yeah, those two were ones. I mean, we didn't get to see the other. So if they were just trying to make it like we didn't see the other guys because they were using their avatars.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. No, I hope that's actually what ends up happening, because that felt like something they really missed out on within the Moon Knight series, and it's like there's no way it was a budget cut because you're Marvel and you have unlimited budget. So it was an intentional choice to keep them within their what did you just call them? The name of the
avatars.
Avatars, thank you. Keeping them in their avatars was a choice, and the only two like true gods we saw were Khonshu, or three gods, because we saw the hippopotamus god and then the crocodile god, whose name also escapes me at the moment. But
one of them is not Tiamat.
I mean, we meet the avatar of Osiris and a couple of other Egyptian gods. So if we get to see them introduced in Omnipotent City in this movie, I'd be pretty excited, because that's a dope way to connect your universe. I mean, obviously Marvel knows what they're doing as far as that goes, but from a fan perspective, that would be really cool.
Tawet is the hippopotamus.
Nice. Yes. You got there. One thing in Omnipotent City was the dope God Library. I put a couple of notes here. I put it similar to the archives of the Jedi within that universe, and also similar to Dream's library in Sandman, the Sandman universe, which that series is coming to Netflix in August, and we're going to be reviewing it on Radioactive Papercuts. But the whole idea of those things is it's an established library that not everyone has access to, but it shows the history. And I think I put some visuals from the library itself somewhere. Maybe I don't have. Yeah, nope, that's not it. There's Omnipotent City.
Yes.
And that's the issue cover. I don't have it. It's fine. Omnipotent City, and the laws of gravity don't work in there. It's just a god library. So cool stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel about it?
I thought it was cool. I thought I wanted to see a little bit more about it. Maybe hear a couple more stories that reminds me involved with it.
The library within the Time Bureau, or not the Time Bureau, it's called something else, in Loki.
Yeah, the TVA.
TVA, yeah. The Time Bureau is the Legends of Tomorrow one that I've been watching. But, yeah. Maybe there'll be some sort of connection to that. That'd be kind of neat. But library, grumpy librarian, whatever. It's classic stuff.
Yes. And then it goes into the butchering of more gods, which the panel, I don't think that you clearly didn't save it, but it's when he is seeing the death of the gods that gave me very Adam and Eve vibes. But it's such a colorful shot. And even their blood is more of like a purple than a red, but it's so weird to have it so lit up. Because whenever you think of like serial killers or murders and stuff like that, it's always like this dark and gloomy and like a basement. But to have it so bright and the sun is shining and leaves are in bloom, but to have these two bodies chained up to the tree was so weird. I mean, all of the shots where he's finding all of these gods are all well lit, and it made it so much creepier.
Yeah, we get to that a little bit later with the creepy alien that talks about the artwork of the God Butcher. We'll get to him here shortly, but like I said, Thor's going through, after he discovers the library, he goes to gods that are inactive, that section of the library. And he makes it his mission to go across the universe trying to find out if he can see what happened to the gods. And we see a lot more of like very graphic deaths and brutal ways of killing people. One specifically that stuck out for me is the one I have on the page right now. And I cannot read the actual name of the god right now. But it's shot for shot something that's in the Thor
Mm-hmm.
trailer, which is pretty cool, and I like how it's established that way. It's
Falagard
Falagard
the
Behemoth. Yeah, nice. Got
Yep,
it at the same
Falagard
time.
the Behemoth.
Patron god of the galactic frontier, champion of the Tournament of Immortals for 5 centuries straight. So this one was important because Thor, it was starting to hit home because he saw him, he phrased it, he saw him only 100 years ago. But to him, that is like, a year or two. That god's, I think they said that one had only been gone for 5 years by the time he showed up and found the body, and he still had worshippers trying to, I guess, revive him. Really establishes the power of the God Butcher and how just he's straight up a serial killer, and there's nothing that stands a chance. This behemoth is next level size, and it just doesn't make any sense that someone that looks like him could kill this god, but that's his specialty, is killing immortals.
Something that I read that I thought was really interesting is they like name dropped some more gods at one point, and they said Skrull. They
really?
The,
I guess
one of the Skrull gods.
I guess I didn't catch that. That's actually really cool. There could be something like that. Nice. Gods are dying. All right, there we go. After he jumps across this thing, we kind of get not introduced to old Thor, but a little bit, we get to explore him. Just the idea behind it is his devil dogs keep defeating old Thor, but they refuse to kill him. And they just keep starting over. The whole old man Thor storyline, how did you feel about it?
I'm a sucker for old person stories. Like I'm listening to, like, I hate Star-Lord, but I'm listening to the old man Star-Lord sound audio book.
Oh, I've already read it. It was a Sirius XM. It's actually part of a series. So once you finish that one, you get to move on to Hawkeye, and then Black Widow, and then Wolverine. Yep. I'm actually listening to the Hawkeye one right now. So yeah, shout out to another podcast. Might as well check it out. It's genuinely one of the. It's an audio production, like a drama. So if you guys haven't listened to that, it was originally on Sirius XM, but you can listen to it on Spotify or Apple Podcast. Keep going now.
Yeah, so I'm a sucker for because it truly bogs down whenever it's like an old person on their dying breath. That's when we get the real hero journey that we know is coming from a superhero, and that's why I really, because it boils it down to. They're weak, they're dying, they don't have as much powers, they're not as fit, but they still do the right thing. They still are fighting the good fight, and I always just find that to be super endearing.
Yeah, I think that's why it's become so popular within comic books, and I think we got the live action version essentially in Logan, where we're seeing this godlike character that we've been looking up to for years and reading up on, and they're clearly on their last breaths, and they're showing their true colors, and they're always the real hero they've been in the end. And it makes them more vulnerable, so the stakes are higher. And in most cases, you can give them like an honorable death because these are future stories. They don't necessarily have to be in continuity. So I think that's what makes old man stories so intriguing.
Yes, but I think that this adds to the cycle a lot. Like, when you think of serial killers, 9 times out of 10, I've just watched almost all of Criminal Minds again before Netflix took it away. But when they talk about unsubs and stuff like that, the toying that comes with a lot of the killers, or the mental torture that they put their people on, is just as, if not more, cringe-inducing or serious as the actual murders. So the fact that as Gorr has gotten older, as well as Gorr has gone around, it's not all just about, oh, let me kill everyone. I want to make them suffer. Like, he even talks about during the Pantheon on Indigar, like, he tortured these people. He tortured some of them. That it's what truly makes, and then when we get to his backstory, when you read it more, or if they're going to show it in Love and Thunder, it doesn't take away from the evil that he does, but it definitely shows something. I hope that they really don't make him a sympathetic character. They show the sympathy that he thought he deserves because of what happened to him. But I don't. There's certain characters that I think don't. They can have sympathy. You can sympathize for a moment in their life, but as Joker said, one bad day. But it doesn't make you have to choose that route, and he very much chose the wrong route.
Yeah. Having irredeemable villains isn't really a bad thing. I can understand trying to humanize them a little bit, but I think this might be an example of like you can sympathize with him when he was a child or whatever that he talks about within this story, but he's gone on to become a prolific serial killer of gods. Like he's not someone that's just gonna be redeemed and you can make him part of like some spin-off Suicide Squad of the Marvel Universe type of thing. Like he's a bad dude, and bad dudes need to be put down. So, side note, do you think that Gorr the God Butcher is going to move on beyond this movie, or is it kind of just going to be a full arc and it's going to go mostly classic Marvel route and have a final face-off and have him be finished off?
I feel like I don't know where they would go if he continued on with life.
Right.
So, and I think that the all-black sword needs to be taken away from him in order to really progress Marvel. I mean, in general, if they want to go with the all black, the symbiote wars, whatever they want to do. Gorr is a one-off villain. He does his butchering and then gets stopped. There's no Arkham. There's no prison in which we could house him and then have him return or break out. It doesn't make sense.
You can't throw him on the raft like some MCU villains. No, he's one where he's going to get put down. I agree with you. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. So we're on to issue 4, which was entitled The Last God in Asgard. And that's Thor. It's sad because we're just seeing him, old man, defeated on this just rubble that used to be Asgard. Everybody's dead except Thor. I've got it pictured on the screen right now, and he's just getting taken down by the demon dogs like we talked about. Seeing this, I love it. I don't mean to be like a jerk to Thor, because obviously I don't like seeing my heroes be destroyed. But in this scenario, it just shows the true desperation that he's going through, and makes that character one of the more interesting ones throughout this graphic novel. After that, I put a couple things. There was a cool Stark cameo. I enjoyed that, where Thor returns to the cave that he first encountered Gorr the God Butcher, or not encountered him, but had their discussion. And old Thor had been tortured by Gorr. I don't think I have any of those photos handy, but good stuff. Enjoyed it. He returns and Thor learns from his mistakes. This was one of those instances where we did learn that instead of sending Tony Stark on his way, he sent him to warn the Greek gods of Mount Olympus about this God Butcher situation. So good on Thor.
And it's so with I thought that the little Tony cameo was nice. I like how they got him in and out in a way that slightly made sense. And knowing who Thor is as a person, and Tony's smart enough to be like, "Oh, he's butchering people like gods. You." Oh, I'm a dude in a tin can. Goodbye.
He literally says something like that. He's like, "I get it, God stuff," and then he's like, "I've got other things to do." I'm like, that's so wonderfully written. I enjoyed the cameo. It was very small. It was only a few panels, but totally worth throwing in there. Moving on beyond that, we know that Thor fears the God Butcher from their first encounter in 893 AD because of this scene. And now the Thor in modern day is finally returning to the place. He comes across Shadrach, who's a pansy wine god that Gorr likes to torment and just keep around to, torture him, I suppose. And he did escape eventually, but we're introduced to him, and cruelly, he had his eyelids removed, which was that whole panel where he was talking and you could tell it was a broken down god, and he was acknowledging the beauty and art of killing the divine. Like, that's some pretty intense storytelling stuff. And we were introduced to like almost like a Jar Jar Binks-esque character, but he was still important nonetheless. That whole scene within the cave, both in the past and modern day, where were you thinking, or what were you thinking while reading them?
So I'm gonna keep playing on it because I really love the story of a broken down Thor, or a breaking it down. Like, the fact that he was wounded, lost to Gorr, was only saved by the power of his lightning. Then everyone's like, hey, yo, you shouldn't be getting up or going and fighting. And he's like, nope, I'm going to go. And then gets tortured again. Like, the pride of Thor is a very important thing, because it is like a Saiyan's pride, for all of our DBZ fans out there. Like, the almost death of war does somehow make Thor stronger in a very Saiyan way of doing it. But the pride is what was almost going to get him killed. It wasn't going and stopping. It was him truly going, like, this is my job. I have to take for. And I love the fact that it was none of his gods had died yet.
True. Yes. You talking about Earth's gods?
Norse gods.
The Asgard. Okay, yeah. The Asgardian gods of his pantheon.
Right. At that point, no Norse gods had fallen, but he is doing it for gods. He is doing it because and the story he tells about the killer of other gods, like where he went and like fell in the pit, is a true driving force, where he was like, I had seen my dad come back from war plenty of times. I've seen him covered in blood. I've seen all these things. But war, he was like, war is like something that was chosen, or he brings up the fact that like there was an unwritten agreement when going into war, where both sides, both parties, at least back in that day especially, like when a war was happening, they had very specific rules for war, all the way up until like World War One and a little bit of World War Two. Where it's like, oh, it's nighttime, we stop. No one no one crosses like this barrier. We fight, we shoot, people fall. We allow you to get your people. We'll
Shout
go
out
to sleep,
to America for switching that up in the Revolutionary War.
But I mean that's where Thor, like, that's a lot of where Thor's anger started to come from, is like, this isn't honorable. I understand, like, it's not the fact of him killing gods. It's the fact that he's doing it dishonorably. He's doing it with no rhyme or reason as what Thor can tell right now. He's just killing to kill.
Viking, it's just like in Viking culture, you let your opponents like burn their dead and all that stuff. You gotta like respect human life. I mean, it's not exactly the same because Gorr's killing the immortals, but at the same time, he didn't have to leave them butchered up or hanging from meat hooks or just dismembered and decapitated and thrown in rivers and stuff. He could have been more respectful about it, or he's truly a bad person, and that irks Thor. Not just the fact that he's killing his peers.
Yeah, for me, I think a one change that I would have done, again, shout out to the writers, to the artists. I am not telling you how to do your job under any circumstance, but I think it would have made Gorr very intriguing if, even after he did all of that, to still have some type of, like, the most bottom set of respect. Whereas, like, even if he decapitates, he constantly, like, makes them, like, put them in, like, a burial type of, like, their, like, how...
Yeah, have more people, of a serial killer type of thing. Like, what was it? I think it was Irish gangsters used to put pennies over people's eyes, that type of thing, or the mafia used to leave a rose on the body or deliver roses to the wives of the men they killed, that type of thing. Where
because it...
Right, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was going to say, that exactly, because when Thor finally confronts him, it would add so much more of a level of, oh, they weren't doing their godly duties, but they were men and women who still like died. It just adds a whole new level to me. But again, if we're making Gorr evil for evil's sake, which they pretty much do, that's fine. It's just how I would have probably wrote him just a little bit differently.
I mean,
especially because of his backstory.
It's certainly possible that is something he does in the movie. I mean, we're gonna see how it goes. Obviously, I'm really excited for this movie. Obviously, we're doing a Thor week. We're doing this for all the Marvel movies, introducing a full week of episodes, just getting hyped for this stuff, and it's working on this one. I read this comic book. I'm like, ooh, I can't wait to see what they do. Like when Kevin Feige gets his hands on this material, type of thing.
One thing I will say that is like about the movie, and this one I'm a little bit less like, oh no, they're doing this. I love Thor Ragnarok. I love the story from Norse mythology. I love the story in the Marvel pantheon that is Ragnarok. And I didn't like the way that they made everything comedic and funny and stuff like that. And with this one, I know that's what Taika Waititi's going to do. I just hope that there are moments where he truly doesn't let things be sad.
I think that is going to be the case. There's going to be some sense of like just sombering moods. They're going to be sad people because they're deaths of gods. Like obviously Ragnarok had a couple of scenes, but you're right. For the most part, a lot of it was improv and jokes, and people loved Ragnarok for those reasons. I've seen plenty of memes online where it's comparing the first two emo movies to like the second two just having rainbow hair, and it's very funny. We love memes. Go check out the Marvel Stuff Facebook page. But yeah, I think this one's gonna have more. It's gonna have a darker undertone, which I mean, you and I. It's no secret from the Papercuts, like we're really into dark stories and just
yeah.
We're a couple of sad boys and we like seeing other people sad.
Where's my Marvel Black Label, damn it? Where's my Marvel Black Label?
Real Marvel, get on that. DC Black Label's running circles on you guys with making cool stuff like that. But that's beside the point. Movie we just got through issue 5. Movie's gonna be great. Really excited. Good stuff. The final issue, I've got a picture here. This one's called Dream of a Godless Age. And this is where it took almost a turn where I don't know if they're going to try and do something similar within the movie. Because Gorr, it seems like he goes to, what was the name of the planet? There it is. On Shronux is what it's called. It's called the Place of Infinity, which no one knows about, and what they do is they can kind of time travel and put themselves in those different situations. And we are introduced to one Time Lord, the last one, because Gorr killed all of them and filled a pool with their blood. Mm-hmm. And the explanation of that is these Time Lords would use some of their divine blood, and they could go through history and only do things that they felt were necessary. They weren't making waves or leaving anything too far out of whack. But what Gorr is doing, instead of using a couple drops, he fills a pool with the blood of all of the Time Lords except the one, and he's bathing in it, and he's making it to where he can go all the way back to the beginning. And he wants to kill the first god. Which... What? Where did that come from? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird jump. The panel that you have up right now, one thing I want to note is the very specific art choice of the black that they use on him. Mm-hmm. When it's like the full body armor, and it's very like almost pencil-like. Like they did shading with like a regular,
like
Ticonderoga,
like a Sharpie type thing. Yeah, you can see the lines within it, which I was like, that's kind of a choice. You could have just done solid black. I think it's cooler to do like adding some texture to it.
Mm-hmm.
Really gorgeous stuff, and obviously Gorr, he went back 14 billion years or whatever they said the beginning of time was, and he wants to kill the first god. I don't have an image of the first god, but it's just a fat baby, which I thought was really an interesting choice. And the fat baby was creating just these life forms that were begging for death, is the way they phrased it. So he's creating the first signs of life, and minutes after they were created, they started wanting to die. Gorr kills the baby god and brings back the warm heart back to current times. And the Time Lord's like, dude, I can't believe you did this stuff. And then this is where Thor shows up again. And in these specific images that I'm showing, I loved the jump between modern day and the past where he was getting tortured, really explaining the relationship that Gorr and Thor have in their history, and then kind of what's going on here in modern times. How did you feel about the storytelling of it all?
I thought that the storytelling, again, I was super, the last couple of issues didn't lose me, but I talked so much about how I loved the beginning part of the story, where it felt more like a story, where it felt more like a legit lore mythology story being told. And this one became a lot more of them conversating and talking about their feelings, which isn't wrong, and it was well done. But I liked the beginning part where it felt more like an old wives' tale, an old Norse story, like the beginning part of Gorr the God Butcher could have been in Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, and I would have believed it. But now, the way when it started to go more in I mean, not even the bathing of all of the
comic
other
book
gods.
Of it
yeah.
all.
When it started getting more comic booky, it actually started to lose me, which was weird.
Yeah, it's these type of stories, they do start to lose me. I think you and I are very, not in all cases, but we like to stay grounded within the stories and like have it make sense. And this is getting like very spectacle, magic, god, divine stuff. I mean, it's still a good story and I would recommend reading it. But the end here kind of loses me. And the jump to Old Man Thor, which I'm showing here, modern age Thor gets to meet future Thor in future Asgard. I don't know, man. It was like, what is happening? It was cool because it reminded me of the Batman Beyond episode where Batman got to use the Lazarus Pit, and we got to see Prime Batman fight with Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond. But that's not exactly what happened here. They did get to try and fight. I don't know if like the future volumes are going to be exploring this relationship a little bit more, because it felt like it fell flat because nothing really happened after they did get to team up with each other.
Yeah, that's one part of when things jump into the future compared to jumping in the past. I always find that to be a little more convoluted than the past, because jumping in the future, seeing your future self and stuff like that, then as soon as that's where most of the paradox can happen. I could go to the past and be in France, never meet one of my relatives, never do anything, and time would theoretically be closer to the same, even if I was in France for 20 seconds. But I go to the future and meet my future self and dap myself up, I then immediately would disappear, you would think. Or, because, like, even in that moment,
not a new concept. It's explored in a lot of modern media and the repercussions of it. I mean, it's all make believe, but I see what you're saying.
Right, but then you would think, because then you would think at one point your future self would be like, "Oh, I should be showing up what's up, self?" Like, but the way that Thor, the old Thor, was acting, he didn't know that he was going to be meeting himself. He wasn't acting on this intent that, oh yeah, I come back and save myself later on. And that's where it kind of starts to fall flat for me.
Yeah, because it seems like it was something they would remember. But that's why I thought it was so weird, because this is actually the last screenshot I took of this comic book, was these two meeting, because it was near the end. And we're kind of left open-ended. That's the one problem with doing volumes, like I said, in like we're doing issue 1 through 5, but this went on for 20 issues, so we don't get the conclusion we really want. But we did get to explore Gorr the God Butcher, and I appreciated it. It was fun stuff. This is the image we have as our background right now, and I think it's really cool. It shows the past Thor, modern Thor, and future Thor, and then Gorr in the background there. Good stuff. Great comic book. I'm going to continue reading, like I said. Noah, final thoughts on this?
I mean, I like how
Gorr
excited
escapes.
for the
Sorry,
movie.
I didn't say how it ended.
Oh,
Gorr
yeah.
doesn't get
And then-
killed yet.
And then he hushes everyone to silence,
Right.
which I will then, because that just brought up a wonderful juxtaposition and not foreshadowing, but callback to the fact that I say that he gets stronger the less people believe and the less stories are kind of about them. It's so intriguing because at the beginning, that same Thor shunned a man for calling the times of their God's stories or the fact that they didn't believe in them anymore. Like he's like, do you deny the story that you've heard about me? He's like, no. Like my mom used to tell me the stories of our God, and he got visibly upset and visibly angry about the fact that stories weren't being told of the great escapades of gods. And then at the very end, one of the last things young Thor says, when they're like, he's slain the God Butcher, he's gone, he says, no, we will never speak of this day again. The fact that he, of all the other Thors, shut down a story was the beginning of the Thor who understands he might be a god, he might be immortal, but he's still mortal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I love how that's kind of an inside look of probably what would happen in modern society, because there are so many, defunct religions. Like, we call it mythology now, but gods were truly praised like that back in ancient Greece and, Sweden, Norway, all that stuff. They did have their gods of the elements and humanity and all that good stuff. And it is odd that we can dismiss things like that, but then there's still, modern religion. Those all gods would be pissed about that because they're like, what? Why are these stories more believable than our stories? And having a god react to the treatment of gods was a cool thing to get to see on panel and maybe on screen. I guess we'll see how it goes. But that about finishes it up. This is day 2 of Thor week. Noah, always fun having you on. I'll have you do a full review with me next week. I know Coach and I are going to do our full review on Friday, but you're not watching it till Saturday. So we'll do a second one. It's going to be sick. We appreciate you guys over the Marvel stuff. If you guys are really into geeky comic book stuff for things that aren't Marvel, jump over to the Radioactive Papercuts podcast. We release every Wednesday. Me and Noah killing the game all the time. Love you guys. In the words of the great Coach, just try not to have too much fun without us.